All right, welcome back into a new episode. I'm not even sure what episode we're on right now, but we're
Big
moving
time. We're
along.
big time.
We're moving along, but yeah, welcome back in. We got hopefully another short episode. This week it's just going to be us. We're going to be recapping some of the last few games, talking about what's going on with Kansas basketball, and then bringing on Jesse Newell to educate us a little bit because he follows everything a little bit closer. But yeah, I wanted to talk a little Kansas basketball with you, and hopefully this will be a good episode.
Yeah, it's funny because it was just last week, I believe, that we had our last episode, and they've had 3 games since then.
Yeah.
So we definitely have a lot to talk about, and it's an exciting time. I can tell you, man. Watching the games, I get those goosebumps. I even though I'm a huge college football fan, I'm a big college basketball fan as well.
Yeah, and the other night was a fun, day in college basketball. You got the upsets, close games, buzzer beaters. Kansas was a part of one, as you know.
Yeah.
And we'll get to that in a little bit. But I want to start with the Texas Tech game, just because that was before this last one. That was a big one. That was the L. And ask you a little bit, about your thoughts on, that game and specifically, we got the breakout game from Dave, which I guess we'll start with that because you are right. There's 3 games. We'll start with that first one. They go to Oklahoma State. A few minutes into the game, coach is chewing out Dave. He has 0-0. Not very effective yet. Coach Self is in his ear and applauded him because he came back and showed out the rest of the game and did exactly what we were hoping he would do in response to that. And, just like that was exactly what I think Kansas fans were wanting. And then we get to Texas Tech and then Iowa State, and you start to see that, fall off a little bit. So I want to actually start with him. We'll start with him before we get into anything else because we're bigs and, we love to start with the bigs. So we'll start with David. And let me ask you, at this point, he had the Oklahoma State game. They go down to Texas Tech, a little bit limited minutes again, comes off the bench again. Don't get quite the same game as Oklahoma State. And then you got Iowa State where they actually turn to KJ Adams now. So for Dave, what is the next step that you take for him? After you've now tried just about everything, what is next for David McCormick?
So for him, or are you asking me what is Coach Self's next step?
From a coach, if you're coaching him and you're trying to get the most out of him, you've tried everything. Now you're putting in KJ Adams. What's next that you're doing to try to get the David McCormick that you need?
So there's only a couple different options that you have at this point. One option is that he just doesn't play. And he just literally sits and becomes, and when I say don't play, I just mean very, very spot minutes, almost like, hey, he comes in for a few minutes here and there. I have a hard time believing that Coach Self is going to leave someone like that on the bench who does have the talent that he does have. But at some point, you also, as a coach, have to go, well, then I'm done. You know what I mean? Like at some point, you have to realize that there's only so much that we can do. And so, the Mitch situation, Mitch is a 10-year senior, right? I mean, he's been there for like a decade.
Almost as long as Perry Ellis was, right?
Exactly. So, I mean, he's been there for a while. So you kind of got that, right? But then with all of a sudden, with KJ coming in and starting, that had to sting a little bit. That, you know what I mean? Like that something had to hopefully that feel inside that he goes, wait a second now. Now somebody else is coming in and starting. So, he had 17 points and 15 rebounds against Oklahoma State. The guy can play, right? The guy can play. He has some limitations. We talked about that. But we know at the Division I level at Kansas, he can play. something else seems to be going on. And I know that coach is trying literally every option that he possibly has to get him to respond. So now the way I would play this is I would look back at why was their success against Oklahoma State. Okay, so he chewed him out, right? Like you said, and all that. And then all of a sudden, next you know, he's flying around and he's getting in position. He's getting a bunch of rebounds. He's getting and one. He's getting all of this. So let's go back to the basics of that. What's going on? You know, when you watch, and I know we were just doing him as a totality, but when you look at the Texas Tech game, there just seemed to be times where he was back to overthinking and kind of out of position and jumping over people's backs. And sometimes they call it something, you know, it's like it just didn't feel like he was really set in the game and really just letting the game kind of come to him. Remember, those are phrases I've said to you a million times. Mm-hmm. Let the game come to you. Don't worry about trying to go out there and set the world on fire. Just do what you do best, and good things will happen from it. And then obviously you flow into Iowa State, and he was a non-factor. So, I mean, you know, Coach Self makes a lot of money trying to figure this stuff out. So I'm not quite sure ultimately what the direction he's going to go in, but I can tell you that that it would be hard for me to leave someone as talented as Dave on the bench. I would try and figure out some way to make this work.
Yeah. And right now it almost feels like, because, you know, with the KJ Adams situation, he's starting, but it's not starters minutes necessary. What it feels like is a lot like my sophomore year, the beginning, the first time the stretch of starts. You know, the end of the season, I was able to earn some trust and, you know, get those starters minutes. But early on, I was starting games as like an honorary starter. You know, I'd go out there, I'd check in, you know, do my thing.
Wave.
For 5 minutes, come out, and then I'd come in, start the second half, and then come out, and then that was it. You know, and
you're like 8 minutes.
That's kind of how it felt. However, you know, I think that it can be used as motivation. I think that that's his intention. You know, he was not starting KJ necessarily to play him starters minutes, but you know, you're trying to work with everything, and you know, I think that moving forward, there are going to have to be some more angles that you try with Dave until he gets it, you know, figured out, because it is pretty apparent that that is their best chance at success. I think that Mitch gave really good minutes when he's in, like he normally does, but that's what you need off the bench, and that's what you need in spot minutes. He has a role. He plays that role very well. KJ as well, you know, if they're in foul trouble, he can come in, give you those spot minutes. But if you're talking about, you know, long spurts of play in the game, a consistent big to lean on, which every team is going to need, it's David. And I think that, you know, it's going to take him having one of those moments where he starts earning the trust of his teammates again. And, you know, they go to coach almost like, you know, happened my junior year and say, hey, this is who we want, because that's what's going to bring this team together, and he can be that anchor that this team is so desperately needing inside.
Yeah, and no doubt, if you take the center position at KU right now, and if you just take those three guys, it's almost like those three players, if you could meld their best attributes into one, then you would have the ultimate player. I mean, because if you think about it, McCormick is you know, offense, he can score, you know, he can do some rebounding. Defense is not his you know, his favorite thing to do, but you know, he could do it here and there, but he's more on the offensive minded side of things. And then you've got Mitch, who seems to be more on the defensive side minded piece to it, and he wants to block shots, and he does a great job. He does. I'm telling you, he learned that from you, where he gets that verticality piece where he doesn't have to actually block the shot. It's not even a stat in the shot, you know, in the score card, but it actually either changes the velocity, or it changes the direction of the shot. He's able to do that, and he does that very, very well. And then, you know, KJ's just the Energizer Bunny. Comes off the bench, he's flying all over the place, and he's a undersized starting center, which just warms my heart. as well. So you take all of those pieces, the energy and all of that stuff, and you put it together. And it seems like if you could find, if any of those three could do the other pieces, then you would have your problem solved.
Here's the thing, though, that this team, what they need is defense, rebounding, good screening,
Yes.
all those things that when you said offensive minded about David McCormick, that's the last thing that he should be at this moment. The first step should be going out there and doing those other things and then working back towards that. I'm sure if he went out there and had, one of those games where he has a ton of rebounds and, no points or whatever, and plays great defense and does all those things, like we've been talking about, that's going to open up more stuff. And I promise you, coach will love that more than anything. His teammates will love that more than anything. And he may not think so, but honestly, fans will love that too. It may not seem like, oh, I didn't score the 20 or whatever it was, but this team is really needing that from him. And then he can always build off of that. Because as as a player, when you're in the game and you're doing those things and you got the confidence from your team, those shots seem easier. You shoot things with a little bit more confidence. Things just start coming to you a little bit easier. So I think, changing that mindset is going to be an important part. And I did a interview yesterday with a writer, Nick Schwartz, and he was talking a little bit about, his accolades coming out of high school and how that may be affecting him a little bit, because he has one thing in mind and stuff. And I think that, he just has to start doing his best to move away from that, because if you really break it down, what this team needs is those, small things. And if this team's successful, Coach Self always used to say, the better we do, the pie is big enough for everybody. It's going to be a big pie if we make it, far. And, if he does those things to make this team successful, he's going to see a lot of that come back to him, as opposed to, trying to force it and not, make that switch, and then have this team's success, not be what its potential is.
Yeah. So you're right to a degree, though. I mean, in my opinion, you need to have someone who is not a black hole inside, but you do need to have somebody who is at least a threat, or at least is a confident scorer. At least there's a chance that they may go to the rim. Because if you don't think about the good coaches and how they can scheme against that, I mean, if I know that there's no chance that you're going to do anything, or if you catch the, because you could work and get an angle and all that, if I know that you're not really a threat, then I'm not going to send any help. I'm not going to do anything. I'm going to extend out on the perimeter, and I'm going to make those guards beat me. So I agree with you. What they really need is, because if you look at the rebounding column, it's a lot of ones and twos often, and that's not good. Up and down, with all of the team. But I would say, though, it'd be nice if he did those things that you did talk about, but also when he did get position and they got him the ball, man, he would be a load to try and score. And I think that Dave is, of those three, Dave is the most likely to have that mindset.
Well, here's the problem that I'm seeing, though, is there's all of a sudden in these last few games, and especially Iowa State, there is zero confidence in throwing the ball inside.
Well, exactly.
And that's developed to the point where, they're not even considering that. So it's coming, it's extending all the way out to the guard play. And that's where it's hurting, because there actually are times where they get decent position and this and that, but the lack of confidence has completely fell off of a cliff. And you see these guards that are, just not even giving them opportunities. And, it's one thing to be a threat and a scorer and a Joel Embiid, that you catch on the block and stuff. But really, you mentioned, catching on the block and them, not sending help and stuff. But it's so these teams, it's just nature when you see a 6'10" guy catch the ball in with a foot in the paint, to just collapse a little bit around him. You just have to. You have to respect that, because that's such a high percentage shot that I think that if they could just start working on, getting him the ball in position a little bit more and start building that confidence back, which comes with those other things, they're going to have to come back around to it. Because I saw in the Iowa State game, I mean, it was you could probably count on one hand the amount of times that they threw the ball into the post, and that's not okay. And as a big, we got to get some help from the guard. So.
Yeah, we need some love. And you're right; it's a high percentage shot. But if you're a player that makes a low percentage of those, you're not a threat. You're not a threat. And I'm sorry. And these players are too good. They're just too good. And you know what I mean. And coaches are too good. And I'm gonna, it's gonna get. They're so talented overall. That they're going to win a bunch of games, and they're going to be in the NCAA, and they're going to be, so there's no problems there. The question is, in the tournament, when you start getting deeper and deeper and deeper into the tournament, and you're in a Sweet 16 or an Elite 8, and you're playing against a dang good team that's battled to
Purdue or like a Caleb, somebody like
that's
that.
what I'm saying. That's exactly what I'm saying. That's going to be that's going to be a load, because they're just not going to be able to rely on that as much as possible. And I did see multiple times, he just went small. He just took all three of those guys out and just went small, and they were just going all over the place. So anyway, it's a fun time. I do have something though I wanted to ask you. In terms of, I have a belief about rim protection, and I don't know if this is the appropriate time to talk about it, or if we want to get into each individual game or not. So I'm gonna let you.
No. We'll bring on Jesse to talk about each individual game. So go ahead and we'll do this first.
So I was, I'm watching the Texas Tech game, and there was all this hoopla about the fact that they're lacking this rim protector. They're lacking that presence and all of that. I take a little exception to that. Okay. Yes, you're right. There's no Joel Embiid. There's no Landen and Lucas. There's nobody inside who you got to worry about coming inside and trying to get some shots blocked and all that. But here's the thing. What constitutes having to protect the rim, in my opinion, or in anybody's opinion? It is when somebody comes in and you've got somebody who can make sure that they can send it out. So it basically is saying, hey, don't come in here. But if you think about it, who opened the door in the first place to allow them to come in? We don't do enough we always go to the rim protector. We always blame the big on this. But we need to put more of an emphasis on blaming some of those perimeter players. They're not guarding their player well enough. So I'm going to give you an example. In Texas Tech game, there was a time when I believe it was McCormick man who was going and setting a screen out there on it was Dewan Harris, right? Okay. On him. Now the screen came well behind the 3-point line, like out of range, in my opinion. But maybe if it was Steph Curry, okay, fine. But for most players, it was pretty much out of their range. Well, Harris trails it. So instead of going under it, he trails it, trails the screen, and so next thing you know, McCormick has to try and, he's up, he's getting up, and he didn't stop it, he didn't hedge, any of that stuff. He didn't. So again, it's fault of a couple of guys, but that guy trails it. He comes around and gets to the rim, and McCormick's all the way is out of position as well. And I'm saying none of that would have happened if he gets under and gets back to his man and does his job first. And so don't get me wrong. It's not that you shouldn't have somebody, you don't have to have somebody who is a good shot blocker or somebody who can protect the rim and all that. I'm just saying that's not just the big's fault. Okay. Yeah. Because there's nobody gets to the rim unless there's a breakdown somewhere else first. And that does not seem to ever come up in conversation. Like, hey, man, one-on-one, they just blew past that guy. You know what I'm saying? So that I just wanted to say I took a little exception to that because I felt like it was just dumped on the bigs.
The bigs, yeah, and it makes sense. And really, in past years, I remember with Jeff Withey and with Joel, as a guard, you almost funnel them to the bigs. It's like if they start driving, Coach Self would be like, all right, Jeff is right there. let him go to the big. Good luck scoring against him, but they have to understand that if they don't have that, which this year, they're capable, but they're not Jeff and Joel and, Udoka inside. It is about positioning, and that's so important. And that's what my teams, this 2016, 2017 teams and stuff, we're so good at as a whole. And that's me as a big included, is positioning. You're just always in the right spots,
Yes.
when that ball screen's happening, there's somebody, blocking off the rejection. You as a big are stepping up, but then there's also a guard, that's there as well. So you're able to drop back. Like, everybody's always in the right spots. And if you get that figured out, as you said, there's no need, that plays a part in rim protection, because they're not even getting to the rim. And so,
exactly right.
I do think it's something that can be highlighted through film. I think there's a lot of things positioning wise that do, even when they switch to the zone in the Texas Tech game. There was a play where they had somebody at the high post, and the ball went into the high post. And they, I believe it was Remy or somebody was up top guarding him already. And Mitch just took a small step up that he didn't need to. And that gave him enough room to get the ball to the low post for a dunk. Yeah. And it was like just that small step. It wasn't even huge, but just the difference between 2 feet there and over is the difference in a momentum shifting dunk. And so I think that, we keep harping on these positions and position, but it's so important for a team that you're not just relying on athleticism and let's just, hope that once the shot goes up, somebody can go, block it. That positioning is going to be key. And yeah, I agree with you that it's everywhere, and it starts up, up top with the guys on the ball, and it can't always just be blamed on the bigs,
Right. We always get dumped on, man. I mean, but I can tell you too that, like you said, you nailed it. I mean, athleticism and just talent gaps, just being so much better, it'll get you through when you're playing, UCSB or something like that. I mean, that doesn't matter. You don't even have to worry about position. You're going to win that game because you just overwhelm the opponent. But man, you start getting into this league, and if you think about it, I think there's projected like 8 teams
there's a lot
that are going to be a seed of 8 or better or something like that, with 2 on the top line. I mean, this league is ridiculous this year, and it's like they're going to need more if they're going to survive.
Yeah. Well, let's go ahead and get to Jesse. And now that we got the big talk out of the way, and we can get to recapping the games.
We can talk about the Reds.
Let's bring on Jesse and talk to him a little bit. I'm doing great. How are you?
Good, man.
Thanks for coming on. We wanted to catch up. We had our last episode, and then there's been 3 big games since then. The Oklahoma State, the lost Iowa State, and then this crazy game last night. So we wanted to bring you on to chat a little Kansas basketball and get your thoughts on some things.
I appreciate it. No, I've loved the podcast. Actually caught up on them. Driving down to Stillwater, so I had a couple of Glue Guys podcasts to catch up on. So it was good to do that.
I've never been binged before, so that's impressive. I'm happy about that.
Yeah, 1.5 times speed. You guys talk really fast too, and no, it was good. I was getting all sorts of these dorm room memories and Nadir. And listen, Tyshawn is one of my favorite people to ever talk to since covering the beat. So it's great to get stories out of those guys and hear them chat as well.
Yeah. Well, I want to ask you. These last couple games, they've been, the loss and then this crazy game the other night. What are your thoughts on this current team as far as their readiness for this Big 12 play? Coming off of a softer than normal schedule in the preseason, now coming into this daunting Big 12. First 2 games were both struggles. One resulted in a loss, or 3 games have been struggles. They got the wins in the other ones. How are you feeling about Kansas as they go into deeper into Big 12 play?
Yeah, I think it's interesting because I think 2 things can be right at the same time. That in the conference, KU is looking a lot better than he did, a couple days ago, because Baylor, I didn't think Baylor would lose at home, and they've been so impressive this year. And I thought that potentially they might run away with this thing. So for KU to be 2-1, and then for Baylor to lose that game unexpectedly at home against Texas Tech, and then for KU to pull out against Iowa State. I mean, Landon, you know this. That's the Bill Self special. Just to win those close games, you're not playing well, you grind it out, but you look up and you win by one. You win those games down Fieldhouse. That's a big deal. So I think, Tuesday was a good step for Kansas in the league race, but yet I feel like they're sort of regressing. I don't feel like they're playing as well and not playing to the level of top 5 team, at least not in the last couple games. So a lot to still figure out. And I think it probably, as you can speak to it, the 1 position without Remy, and then the 5 position with some of the rotation that's gone on there, I think those are where the big question marks still remain.
Yeah. Well, as you said, with Coach Self winning those games, I remember that when we would start Big 12 play or, seasons and stuff, he would always have us in he did this a few years, and he would go up onto the board and he would write, I forgot the exact numbers of everything, but he would, write a few numbers, and he'd be like, this is how many games you're going to play good. This is how many games you're going to play great. This is how many games you're going to play terrible. And you have to find a way to, win in these situations, because when you play at your maximum potential and you're Kansas, those games are pretty much guaranteed wins against a lot of teams. It's about finding a way to win those games that are, those off nights, those nights where you just don't feel right, or it's a close game and on the road or something like that. And so he always harps on that. And, that's why he was able to win so many straight Big 12 championships.
Well, and some of you guys have talked about it too coming on, but what's made him a Hall of Fame coach is that he wants to win every game so badly. He'll put out any rotation. He'll do anything in there, the buttons to push to win every single game. And so that's how you win conference races, is that you don't take any games off. You treat every game like the Super Bowl. And again, for Kansas against Iowa State, it's ugly. It's not where they want to be ceiling wise, but it's a win. And you look up and they're 2-1, and that's how you win league races. Is you don't look back on whatever January 11th and say, oh, I remember that Iowa State game. You don't remember it. You just remember it's a victory, and you see the final standings at the end. So K's at least put itself in a position now against Baylor where they might be able to split and still be in the race. For a while, I thought they'd have to sweep Baylor, which would be a really tough chore this year.
So Jesse, I haven't been to any of the games. I haven't been since Landen has been gone. So I've seen them on television. But I don't know why, and maybe I'm wrong, and please correct me if I am, but for some reason it feels like there seems to be a lack of energy when they're playing. It doesn't seem like, I start thinking back to the Frank Masons and the Devontae Grahams and those guys, when they were on the floor, you knew it. You could feel it. You could sense it. They were always such a presence that while they were out there. And it just feels like we've got some good players. Don't get me wrong; these are unbelievable players, NBA caliber. But I don't know why it just feels like they're playing, but I don't feel that energy. Am I wrong?
So I think at times that has been a struggle, and I think there's a couple things probably going on here. One, I think, is just the way the game has changed a little bit. They switch so much now, and Landon, I think you can speak to this. There used to be a time where Bill Self wouldn't let you switch anything until conference season, because that was the easy way out. You know what I mean? You were not allowed to do it. So I can imagine you guys watching some of these games and being like, what? Wait a minute. It's 26 seconds in the game and they've already made 4 switches. But I mean, as we know, that's how the NBA game has gone too. And you take teams out of actions. But I think when you do that, you also sometimes lose a little bit of aggressiveness, because what you're talking about, Richard, is, a guy like Frank Mason would set the tempo. He would dictate it because he would get into a guy's grill and he wouldn't let you pass, or Sharon or Tyshawn, especially some of those defensive guys, and really set the pace that way. And I think sometimes your point guard can do that. And as we know, Remy is an emotional leader. He's a guy that really gets fired up with the energy in the crowd, all those sorts of things. But most of the time, he has not been that guy that has kind of lifted Kansas with his energy out front when the ball first comes up the court. So it's been a little bit different in that regard. I think, it's also a little bit difficult with these teams in the Big 12 too, because defensively, God dang, I mean, they are good. They heat you up, and they turn you over, and they also slow the pace down. Key's like the only team, I think, looking at some of the tempo numbers out there. I think they're the only team in the Big 12, or maybe one of two, that plays at an above average pace. So it's a little bit tougher when you're kind of grinding things out. It gets to Big 12 play to kind of amp things up. But I think it's mostly just a result of the switching, and Kansas is not quite comfortable yet figuring out a way to have the right amount of aggressiveness with that while also executing all those things that are happening behind the scenes. You have seen them be more aggressive in ball screen coverage. They've started to blitz some of those, to double team them, to try to kind of speed things up, create turnovers, leave themselves a little bit more vulnerable on the back end. It hasn't quite all come together yet. But I think, Landon, I'll throw it to you because I think you can speak to this as well, which is, I think sometimes we've talked about, hey, Kansas doesn't have it figured out defensively in January. And then you look up like mid to late February, and it's like, oh, they get 3 or 4 more weeks with Bill Self, with what the rotations are supposed to be, with what's supposed to happen, and all of a sudden things kind of start to come together.
Yeah, and it's the fact that you went to the switching as the reason behind maybe some of that lack of energy. I mean, I haven't thought of that, but that actually is a great way of looking at that, because it is true. There is a big difference between, I remember there being times where I knew my guy, and I was so pissed if Coach Ever, I wouldn't let him allow me any double teams or anything. That was the last thing I wanted. But it was because I had this pride of guarding my man, and I knew, the stat sheet. I was like, okay, he only has 3 points, or whatever. That was in my head the whole time. And I think that there's, a little bit of that pride and energy of, it's me versus you. And that when you're always constantly switching around and on different people, that could take away from it a little bit. So, that was interesting that you brought that up. And then as far as, Coach Self and defenses developing, I mean, he knows what he's looking for. I think a big part of it is going to be the lineup, and just the lineup being solidified. And right now it is all over the place with, the injuries. They have that carousel of bigs that I was a part of in my junior year before, they went with me. But I experienced that, and it's really difficult when you're in practice and there's, the red and the blue team, and you got, guys switching all the time because, you don't know who's going to be starting. You don't know who's going to be playing the majority of the minutes for the most part at a couple positions. And that hurts a team. And so I think that solidifying that lineup and solidifying who's going to be playing a majority of those minutes, at least a consistent 20 to 25 plus from, those key positions, and the big one especially, is going to help that team, because then you're in practice, who, your guys, what you're going out there with, and it will make a difference once that comes along.
Yeah, and I wanted to kind of throw this at you too, because I know you've talked about David a lot, and obviously this is a big man podcast. It's a glue guys
before
podcast.
Before you came on, we spent 20 minutes talking about bigs. So shoot
it. This is it. Well, here's what I wanted to ask you, and I know you've talked about this on the podcast, and I think it's right, where you talked about how you could be sort of a not a shot blocker, but a lane protector, if you will, and that's part of, I think, being okay with being a role player. And you kind of mentioned how that's something you would probably talk to Dave about if you were to speak with him. But the question I have, we've gotten to see as reporters, some of limited Bill Self practices, but it's funny when you see those, like the art that goes into getting a post pin, because like you'll have, like, for you, I mean, some of the old plays you run, you'd fake one way, throw it the other, and the big man kind of lollygags in the lane, and then boom, flips his hips. You know exactly what I'm talking about. He flips his hips, creates that angle, you throw to the corner of the backboard, and you get a layup. It seems to me, and I mean, obviously the biggest example was, sometimes it happened a little bit in the Dayton game. I know Remy was in the wrong spot, all those sorts of things, but those sorts of plays, they haven't been executed as well. And that, I think, has been a rarity in the Bill Self era, especially with a guy that's been around him as a big man for 3 to 4 years. So I just kind of wondered what you see, because Bill Self so often, I mean, if you look in the last couple games, they're not really playing through the post. I know the defenses make it tough on that, but I guess what I've been more surprised by with Dave is just the fact that it seems like anybody who's been in Bill Self's system for 2, 3, 4 years has that craft mastered. You know what I mean? They know when to look around, when to flip their hips, when to get the seal. And it seems like Dave, a lot of times he's catching it at 12 feet with a defender between him and the rim, rather than over the top with nobody behind him. And he executed once really well against Iowa State. To his credit, he didn't make the layup but got fouled. But I just kind of wondered from your perspective what you're seeing from that, because you've lived that and you've kind of been through those practices, I'm sure, where they're teaching those techniques.
Yeah, and it is a lot of technique. It's a lot of watching film, because you have to be able to see where you are position wise and understand it visually before you can go out there and execute it, very well. What I'm noticing a little bit is there's a combination between struggles that Dave is having, getting and keeping those positions. And then there's a slow decline of these guards. And we just talked about this, looking and getting it to them and just get with that confidence of, it's being swung and then you just throw it in, and stuff. And I was fortunate because I had some guards that even when I wasn't, performing well, maybe around the hoop or whatnot, they were still looking to get, to get it in and had that confidence. And, I think that needs to be built back. But yeah, I mean, it really, as you said, that for being there that long, you would hope that he's developed some of that. But, as a coach, I would just be showing him, hey, this is the position you need. And then I would be on those guards. When David gets in this position, get him the ball. Just throw him the ball. And that will cause the defense to collapse, maybe a foul, some buckets and stuff. Just start getting him the ball in that position. And then when he starts getting off and calling for it, with one hand and hold him off, don't throw it to him then, because that's not when you want him to have the ball. And, kind of just take it from there. And, Dad, I'll kind of pass it along to you from, a coach. You've coached guys and stuff, and now he's been in this system for this long. Yeah. It's his last year, his last season with them. What are you doing to try to get that out of him if he hasn't already got it?
It's funny because you talked about the guards in this, and Jesse, you mentioned the part that we as bigs play in terms of positioning and all that. But you have to remember, it has to come from somewhere. And so that guard or that wing player that is looking to throw it in, you have to show that level of confidence. You have to show that level of, positioning and sealing, so that guard feels very comfortable giving you the ball. Because if you think about it, I've been taught from the time I started playing that a pass that gets deflected is the fault of who? The passer, right? So it's the fault of the passer. And so I'm, Self has, you don't play, right? And so if he feels like, you throw it and somebody comes over and takes it or whatever, he's going to get upset with that passer. Of course, he's going to get upset with the big for giving up the position, but he's going to be upset with that passer. If I'm a guard or I'm a wing player and I'm looking inside and I see no position or I see no confidence, I'm swinging it back around and I'm not messing with that. So it's truly important for him to gain that trust of those players, that I'm going to take care of it. I'm going to make sure that ball doesn't go anywhere if you throw it to me. Now, the second piece to that is, if something does happen and he catches the ball and he's still out of position, because the part of Jesse that I'll let you in on is that as bigs, we don't get the ball that much. So when we do, we're like, oh, it's on. I don't care what, there's 3 players on me. I don't care. The ball was thrown to me. So if you have that mentality, now all of a sudden you get it stripped or you fumble or whatever. You have to have the presence of mind to be able to go, let me look opposite. Okay, that player, the defender came from the opposite wing. I'm going to look opposite. I'm going to kick the ball out there for a wide open 3. Not only is that going to help your team, that's going to build that confidence. And the next time, that defender may not come all the way over, and you're going to have a wide open layup. So it all works in tandem.
No, I think those are really good points. And I think the main point I'm making early on, and Landon, this, is that what Bill Self has taught over time and what his offense does with that pass from the wing is that it makes the game easy for you. You know what I mean? It's intended to create easy opportunities. And again, there's been players over time, you've seen the big men through Bill Self, like over and over, they get those easy baskets, they get those layups. And so it's a way for Dave in practice to make things easier on himself, to get a confidence building layup to start off the game, because they're going to go to the big man to start the game. So it's sort of been fascinating to me, because I think that's been some of the complaints, is that everybody's saying, well, they're playing through Dave and he's 12 feet from the basket. But it's like, well, Bill Self's plays aren't meant to have the big man go 12 feet from the basket. They're meant to have it thrown on the top and have him score a layup. So I think in that way, Dave can help himself. But, I will say this too, and to speak to this, I don't know if you guys listened to the post game last night, but Bill Self made that exact point. He said the guards have limited opportunities right now against some of these, icing defenses, keeping it on one side of the floor, pressure to get the ball to the bigs. But he basically, I think the analogy he used was like, if you get 3 birdie putts in an 18, if you get 3 4-foot birdie putts in golf, you got to make them. You know what I mean? Like you got to hit the ones you have. And I know Texas Tech, there was one where Dave actually set a really good screen. The guard had to go over the top, and then he was wide open cutting the lane, and Christian didn't get it to him. He could just throw it to the corner of the backboard. It could have been a dunk. And then there was one very early against Iowa State where it looked like Bill Self ran a play to try to take advantage of Iowa State's switching defense. KJ was rolling through the middle of the lane without much of a tagger, and DeJuan didn't find him. So I think this is right now, it's starting to become a mental issue with these guards because they don't feel like they can rely on these guys, or maybe they're not open. But yeah, that's when it starts getting in your head, then that starts to be a problem. And that's kind of where the identity crisis is coming for Kansas right now as well.
Well, and I like to say too is that, as a big, sometimes it is, you just need some wins. And what I mean by that is just, like you said, it's just nice to get the ball and get a layup because, we're not, and that's coming from a glue guy, right? I mean, we do the dirty work and we enjoy doing the dirty work. But come on now, too. It's fun to get a dunk. It's fun to throw. I mean, you don't know how many times when I remember and these are great players with Landon, but sometimes Landon would be wide open. I see Landon pointing, and they just they do their own thing. And so, I think the guards can help by also, there's coaches there to coach, no question. But peer-to-peer, I think can be strong as well. And I think if a guard says, hey, I was trying to get it to you, but there was a guy behind. Or I was trying, or you got it to you and the guy double teamed you. Just kick it back out, man. I'll get you. I'll take care of you. Don't worry about that. If I'm having those kind of conversations with my big man, I feel like that's going to help that confidence piece inside.
And I do want to say this too. Landon can help this as well. Or not your Landon. Dave can help this as well. Landon, you gave me so many articles. I can tell you this right now from looking back at the video, because there would be a key play in the game and somebody be coming driving down the lane, and you would seal your guy off. You'd put him on your butt because you knew that guy was
the best, wasn't it, Jesse? That was the best. I got so much content in the Kansas City Star from writing about Landen and Lucas sealing guys at the crucial moment. I remember one was a hustle play you made too, where you were, I think, flat on your back and you hustled down and got a block or rebound on the other end too. But we're talking about glue guy stuff. But again, this is kind of both ways, right? I mean, if there's a play like that where a guard's coming at him and he just sticks his butt. I remember there's one, Bryce Thompson. I mean, you guys know Bryce because he used to play at Kansas, but Bryce was behind Dave, and Bryce can't do anything if Dave sticks his button to him. I mean, Jalen Wilson's going to get a layup, and then Jalen's like, hey, Dave, help me. Next time I'm chucking that into Heather. So there could just be kind of a little bit of, kind of things passing in the night here a little bit. One thing can help the other, and I think both of those parties can help. But, I mean, honestly, guys, I'm still on Team Dave here. I think they really need him, and I think he provides them something that nobody else does. Like I said, when he sets screens, he moves people. They have to go over the top. When he's in there to offensive rebound, he creates more possessions for them. When people come at him in the lane, there's a big body there. So I think they desperately need Dave, and I think he needs to turn around. I think their ceiling is highest with him. So I know you guys already talked 20 minutes about him, and we're going to talk more about him here. But it's a long way of saying, I still think he has to come around for Kansas to be at its best.
I agree 100%. I think that the coach knows that, the team should know that. I think that the best way to start is by doing those little things that, we talk about all the time. Start there. The rest will come, but start there. Build that confidence. If he can have some kind of moment at all, like I did my junior year, where he earns the trust of his teammates and stuff, that will speed up all those, problems. They'll start getting fixed real quick, and you start building those connections with those point guards, with those guards. You're in practice, staying on the same team the whole time. I can't emphasize enough how much just that confidence in practice, being on that blue team instead of the red team and playing a full practice or most of it, with that same team is very helpful. And I promise you right now, the way things are going, he's probably on red team for half the practice, and, it's all over the place. I mean, if he's starting KJ Adams, I promise that in practice, it's just all over the place. Who knows who's going to start? Who knows who's going to play a majority of the minutes and all that? And so if they can start to fix that, I think it'll be helpful. And a question I have for you off of that is, with KJ Adams getting the start now, where do you think Coach Self is going with this next? How is he going to try? I don't know if he thinks KJ is the solution. I think he knows that Davis still that, long-term what they need. But, where does he start moving from this in the next few games? And as you get into Big 12 play, where you need to have some kind of consistency.
Yeah, it's a really good question, and I got a lot of different thoughts on it. It's funny because Bill Self always talks to us about, saying to reporters, you guys make way bigger deal about the starting lineup than I do, that sort of thing. But yet, Bill Self knows the motivational tool it is, and he always tinkers with his starting lineup. I mean, he always does. So he understands. Like, he didn't start Dave against Oklahoma State. Dave comes out and has, 17 and 15, kind of a screw you sort of game, that sort of thing. I mean, he understands that you're pushing buttons when you do that. I had a story in the offseason. It's kind of interesting. I talked to Ken Pomeroy, who's one of the statistical, advanced stats guys out there. And I just asked him, I said, hey, if you had a bunch of depth like Bill Self, how would you utilize it? What would you do? And he said he suggested to coaches before that some of the guys that don't typically play, it would be great to kind of use them like the opener in baseball, where you just put a guy out there, because what his studies have shown over time is that the first 3 to 4 minutes, teams kind of feel each other out. They're pretty tentative. They don't want to get in foul trouble. And he said what he suggested is put guys out there that you're probably not going to rely upon late, but they can just go at it. They can give all-out energy, start the team off right. If they get a couple fouls, it doesn't matter. And then also, if you have a deep bench, it sort of gives them a role. And if they don't play well, okay, you put them on the bench. You got 37 minutes to recover, that sort of thing. So I don't think Bill Self is taking that idea from that, but I can see some benefits from putting a guy like KJ Adams out there because, again, he is team first. He is hustle. Defensively, I think he's very good in that he can help switch 5. He had a play early against Iowa State where he helped recover on a straight line drive from a guard and was able to block a shot. Also, ball screen coverage was helping for other guys. And right now, to be honest with you, Landen, I think KU's getting beat off the dribble too much, and just frankly, their guards are not.
And we put a little bit of blame on the guards earlier in the show because we were like, there has to be something that goes to them. It can't be all on the bigs. But yeah, that's funny you brought that up.
And that's the interesting thing is that big men can really clean up a lot of mistakes. And in college basketball, defending the rim, if you can have one player that does that, I mean, it really is a huge advantage to have. KU doesn't have a true player that does that. So it's kind of this mix and match because it's like, do you want your guards to just be better and more sound, or do you just want to get a guy back there who does a little bit better with that? I don't think KU has a lot of options to do that this year. I think Dave is the best option to do that. So we'll see how that plays out. But I think KJ Adams is an energy guy. I think offensively he's limited at this point. You want to dish it off to him, get some dunks, but we'll see how Bill Self plays this moving forward because he at least is a guy that athletically, strength-wise, you don't say as much as a freshman, he looks like he belongs out there and could give them something they don't potentially have. But I think if he's in there, it's more for the defensive end and to try to give KU a spark where there might not be that, especially in the first 3 to 4 minutes.
So if you have, let's just talk big picture about this team this year. If you had to bet a year's salary on how far they would go, how far? How good is this team really?
Well, first off, I'd put the backing behind Landen and Lucas and poker before I'd put a year's salary on any sort of KU thing here. Landen, I do want to tell you, I over the pandemic, I tried to study the books in poker. I got really into it, all this sort of stuff. So it's kind of following your career and everything. But I did have went to Vegas and got a Hendon mob page for one of my places.
You're on Hendon.
So, from Lawrence, Kansas, Lorrance. So somebody didn't know how to spell it, but I did look it up, and I've got my notes in front of me. Your career live earnings are 665 times what mine are. So I've got just this much, this much to catch up to you. I'm working on it. So anyway, right now, I think they're about where they started the season, right? I mean, I would say they're in the 5 to 10 range. And I would say probably a week ago, I would have said they've been 4 to 5, but I mean, that's sort of what we talked about against Iowa State. It's great to stay in the league race. It's great to be 2-1, but the last 2 games have kind of shown that they're scrambling right now. They're trying to figure out, they don't know their 5 position. And without Remy Martin, they don't know their 1 position. And Landon, this reminds me a little bit of the 2018 team in that I think it's just naturally going to be better offensively. And that team went to a Final Four, which is fine, but I think you just have to give up something defensively because they don't have, as we mentioned, they've got to be like the whole is better than some of the parts thing, and they don't have the rim protector to clean up a bunch of mistakes on the front end. So they're going to have to just be cohesive, and that's going to have to be good enough to get them along. And then transition-wise, they're going to have to be great. They were elite earlier in the year. So I still think they can get to a point where they could be a 1 or a 2 seed. I still think they could get to a point with the right bracket where they'd be a favored in every single one of their games. So, Elite 8, Final Four, right on that fringe. I think they still have the potential to be better than they are right now. And we talked about defensively how they can get better with time with Bill Self and obviously when they're whole. But, at this moment, they probably would be getting to that Elite 8 game if they won all the games they were favored and come up against an opponent that'd be a 2 or 3 point underdog against, that sort of thing. So that's a great spot to be in, and upsets happen, but I still think they have more to reach their ceiling. And like I said, Remy Martin's a big part of that, and just figuring out that 5 position and potentially Dave playing better. I think if those 2 spots were solidified, I'd feel a lot better about the Jayhawks' chances.
There's so many times in the game where I see, if they're so close in certain positions, and we always talk about positions. We spent the first 20 minutes of the show talking about positions and stuff. There's small things that they can fix, and that, I'm sure they're watching film on. And if they can do that, it will help so much. There's easy buckets that they're giving up by being a step out of position, or, the thing you mentioned with David, just getting a body on somebody in a certain, spot here or there. It's a difference in, them taking a good lead and extending it to a great one or whatever it may be, and not. And if they can start doing that, and one thing that I realized in the Iowa State game that can't happen anymore. Now in Oklahoma State, Harris had an amazing play where he dove for the ball and got the steal and stuff. That was a great hustle play. But there were a few times in the Iowa State game where I think there was a free throw shot, I remember, where the ball went up in the air and it was a 50-50 ball. And David had pretty much 2 hands on it, and the little number 2 from Iowa State ended up coming away with the ball with like a minute left and stuff. But it's just small plays like that if you can just change that, they're already competing and beating pretty good teams. And I believe that they could hit their ceiling, and their ceiling is obviously, probably just as good as anybody in the country or close to it. I think that they're close, but the small mistakes that they're making right now are just costing them pretty big, and it's just showing up in these close games. And then obviously like the loss to Texas Tech.
It's amazing you said that, because I wrote about that after the Texas Tech game. One of the biggest plays of the game, KU comes out of a timeout. Texas Tech shooting a free throw, misses it, and Jalen Coleman-Lance forgot to box out the shooter, and the ball comes right back to the shooter. Those are the things that, especially Bill Self, drive you crazy, because it's like that is the controllable. The NCAA rate on offensive rebounding percentages off free throws is like 10%, and that's a 10% play that should never go against you, because after a timeout, especially, you just need to be locked in. It takes no effort to remember your assignment. And so those are the sorts of things, I saw last night, I put this up on Twitter, but, KU starts to make a run at Iowa State. The crowd gets up. Everybody's kind of going crazy. Iowa State sets a real high ball screen, and DeJuan Harris tries to poke it away from behind and gambles. And he leaves his leaves his teammates kind of out on an island, and they kick it out, and Iowa State makes a 3. And I think some of those plays, Landon, you could speak to this, just Bill Self gets a comfort level with the guys on the floor because they understand what he's thinking, time, score, momentum. And I think there's still growth there too, because there's times Dave had one late. He tried to gamble for a steal with like 2 minutes left out on the top, and you could see Bill Self kind of grabbing his head, like, just solid. You know the word solid. Just play solid. It's late game. It's late shot clock. Just don't gamble. Just make them make a tough shot. So there's a lot of those little things. Again, they become big things, and then that's why we're talking about this on the Glue Guys podcast, because once those things come about, you're talking 6 points. You're talking 8 points. Can you give it 3 points against Texas Tech because they couldn't block out a free throw shooter? 3 points is big. 3 points there, 2 points here, 3 points there. You add those up, and all of a sudden Kansas is sort of getting toward that point that we expect him to be at come late February and early March.
So Remy, I saw him when he was here when he's here when he's in the Pac-12. I follow the Pac-12 a lot more closely, and he was a stud at ASU. He it seems like when he's out there, he makes guys better. Are they just really missing him at this point?
Well, I think it's twofold. I think one is when you play these teams in the Big 12 that just pressure the heck out of you and make it difficult and trap you and all these things, you want to get as many ball handlers as you can on the court. If you look at the St. John's game earlier the year in December, St. John's is a pressing team, and they pressed Kansas for about 5 possessions, and Remy and Harris just ran circles around him and went and got layups for their guys. So St. John's called off the dogs. They're like, forget this, not going to press KU's 2-point guards because they've been so good at creating for others and getting through it. But now, hey, okay, so you got Texas Tech, you got Iowa State, you got West Virginia coming up. I mean, all these teams, top 15 in the nation and forcing turnovers, it's tough. I mean, these are like the exact matchups you don't want to be missing one of your primary ball handlers. So I think that's one thing. I also did a video. It's really subtle what Remy does. He's so good at looking ahead in transition. And not only that, he allows guys like Christian Brown and Ochai Agbaji to not think, hey, I got to go back and get the ball. It just lets them take off. They go and they run, and they just know they can take off because Remy's going to get them the ball and somebody else can bring up the floor. So I think he's made them a lot better in transition. And we talk about those easy baskets. That faucet's turned off in the last couple of games when Remy's not out there and not himself. And I think that's become evident that KU's not getting the transition buckets. They're not getting the easy buckets. And early in the season, I think they were probably statistically the best transition offense in the nation. So that really, I think, is where it's affecting them. They're not getting those 8 to 10 free points a game that they were getting early in the season. And a lot of that is Remy is making these very quiet plays that are making his team better and making winning plays. And so, they need him back. But at the same time, if we're looking big picture, I mean, we've seen Kansas now without him. They might want to get him healthy. That might be the big thing. I mean, getting him 12 minutes where he doesn't look like himself, that's not very helpful either. So you kind of have to weigh the long-term and the short-term here. And obviously Bill Self, he said it after the game. He said, let's call it like it is. The team needs Remy Martin back. So we'll see how quickly he can get back out there and be effective for the Jayhawks, because offensively they go to another level when he's in there.
Jesse, thank you for coming on. I love your stuff. The thing that I like so much about it is, and you mentioned a couple of the video breakdowns you've done, he thinks like a glue guy. You know, he notices those
Totally.
he notices all those little things that a lot of people don't, and they're so important to the game and such a big part of the game, and stuff that coach, Self sees, all the coaches and all the players. And I really do appreciate, that from you. And we were very happy to have you. You're an honorary glue guy in our eyes, for sure.
Yes.
I know you guys go late, so I'm going to even push your podcast longer. But I want to mention 2 quick things. First, Richard, I want to ask you this, because my one main memory of you is this. I know you wore an Oregon shirt in the Sweet 16 of Landen's senior year. Did you wear one in the Elite Eight game of his senior year when they played Oregon?
He better not have. I think
so the Sweet 16, I wore the Oregon shirt, yes.
Yeah, because it's alma mater. Yeah, absolutely.
Yes. But Jesse, you're going to be removed from the glue guy.
Yeah, we just brought him.
We talked about we would never discuss that game, but so no. I was this is the only time in my entire life and affiliation with Oregon that I just hoped to God that they would win.
Yeah.
So no, I was 100% KU. It was not even a question. And I had so many people going, well, it's a win-win. I'm like, no, the hell it's not.
It's a lose-lose, baby.
It's a win if KU wins, and if, I mean, like, I'm just not. So anyway, so no, I was 100% KU, and it was one of the worst games I've ever watched in my entire life.
I'll finish with this. So I play a slow pitch softball, guys, not well, but my number's always been 5, but somebody else on the team had 5. So our manager was asking me like, hey, what number do you want? I was like, hey, pick one out for me. I didn't want to show you the old Highland Construction, but here's the number he picked out for me. I was 33 years old at the time, but then I have to give a shout out to Cody, because he did tell me later that the reason that he picked 33 for me was I'm not the best softball player, not the most talented, but I am one of those glue guys who gets the most out of his ability, understands the game, does the little things. So I am the Landen Lucas of my slow pitch softball team. So I thought you would appreciate that.
I love it. I love it.
That's awesome.
Well, thank you for coming on and talking with us. We'll have to have you on again later on in the season. I love the way that you look at the game and whatnot, and your analysis was great. So thank you for giving us the time, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Hey, thanks, Landon. Thanks, Richard. Appreciate it.
Yep.
Have a good one. All right. Well, as we come to a close, it was nice to have Jesse on. Like I said, I had to compliment him because he is, one of those writers that he sees those things and he points it out. He makes it a point to get, to push that out. I always remember, he would, write up every time I see him tweet. It seems like he's analyzing the game far from a, stat sheet and, what a normal fan may see and see those small things. And so it was really nice to have him on and get some of his thoughts.
Yeah, I agree 1,000%. I mean, I always, as the parent of a player like you, it was always very, it warmed my heart when I would see that he would put things that were beneficial to the victory or to a winning program that didn't automatically show up in the stat sheet. And so when you take that extra step, and too often, folks who follow these games, they get a little lazy and they just look at box scores and they don't really take that extra step to say, okay, yeah, he scored the layup, but why? What happened? What transpired? And then you realize, oh, Landon sealed them off and stopped anybody from coming, which in the stands, you wouldn't see that. So I truly appreciate his real breakdown of the game.
Yeah, it was great. And to hear that he's getting into poker and stuff, that was awesome.
I can give him some lessons.
God.
If he wants to, hey, Jesse,
you want to know how to
watch this back.
time.
If you want to learn how to not lose your money, that's the goal. I don't, I lose money, but slowly.
well, while we're talking about bets, let me throw in this little ad from our people at Bet Rivers. If you haven't yet, sign up with Bet Rivers now because they're offering a $250 match bonus for your first deposit. What sets them apart is that they require just one playthrough to turn your bonus into cash money. With their new Rush Pay instant approval, withdrawing your winnings is safer, more secure, more reliable. Be sure to get over and get into the action by going to betrivers.com today and downloading the Bet Rivers app. You must be 21 years or older, and if you have a gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER. Speaking of gambling, did you hear how many times more my Hendon mom was than him? You were talking about I wasn't a professional. I've done some stuff in the poker world, a little bit.
It was great. It was a nice hobby.
Oh my goodness! A hobby
I throw darts in the basement. So it's a nice hobby.
Anyways, all right. Well, this was obviously, like always, a lot longer episode than we expect. We started talking about bigs, and then it's a hour-long talk about
exactly.
McCormick. And I think we covered the games pretty well, and I am looking forward to see how they do against West Virginia, which is always a tough game.
Always. Is that in Lawrence or is that on the road?
I believe it's in Lawrence,
Okay.
But even in Lawrence, that's a tough game, as you know. It's something about West Virginia, especially on the road. On the road in West Virginia was like you were going there, and it was just like it'd be hard to get to the game. It'd be all snowy. The crowd would show up late. They play the same old few country road songs over and over again.
And you guys almost always came out with an L.
Always came out with it. We would have to scrap and claw our way to a win there. I don't know what it was. The rims felt weird. The court felt weird. I mean, but luckily it's at home, so hopefully they handle business. And then we'll be back again next week to chat a little bit about it. We'll have some guests for you guys, maybe one of the players on or something, and chat a little bit more Kansas basketball. But thank you guys for listening in, and we'll be back next week.
Yeah.